Think about the stories we tell today about power, paranoia, and the crushing weight of fate. They didn't start with us. Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're tracing the bloodlines of gods and monsters, from the absolute dawn of the cosmos right up to the twilight of the Olympian altars. We're getting into the epic of Greek mythology. And look, this isn't just a collection of dusty old fairy tales. This is a massive, tragic, incredibly human narrative that literally shaped the way we understand ourselves. So let's just jump right in.
To really grasp who these gods were, we have to go back to a time before them, before Mount Olympus, before the earth or the sea or the stars even existed. In the very beginning, there was only chaos. Now, forget the modern idea of chaos being just loud and frenzied. This was a yawning, formless void, an infinite, silent nothingness. Out of that absolute dark emerged the primal forces. You had Gaia, the vast and patient earth, Tartarus, the terrifying abyss beneath her, and Eros, the sheer force of desire. Gaia eventually brought forth Uranus, the starry sky, to blanket her. It was the universe's first great union. But as we're going to see over and over again, creation in these myths, it never comes without violence.
Right from the dawn of time, the cosmos was defined by a brutal cycle of fathers and sons. It starts with Uranus. As a ruler, the sky was insanely jealous and completely terrified of losing his grip. When Gaia gave birth to the Cyclops and the hundred-handed ones, these massive, monstrous children, Uranus was absolutely disgusted. He actually forced them back into Gaia's womb, deep into the earth, causing her unimaginable agony. And Gaia, she wanted vengeance. She forged a massive flint sickle and begged her Titan sons to help her. Only the youngest, the most cunning of them all, stepped up, Cronus. He castrated his own father, violently seizing the throne and ending that first reign. But as history always shows us, power seized through ultimate betrayal never really brings peace, does it?
Because as Uranus was dragged off the throne, he spat out this chilling, dying curse. Just as I was overthrown by my son, so too shall he be overthrown by his own. Those words completely consumed Kronos. They became the obsessive, paranoid heartbeat of his entire reign. To make absolutely sure that prophecy wouldn't come true, Kronos did the unthinkable. Every time his wife Rhea gave birth, he snatched the newborn and swallowed it whole. Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, Poseidon, just gone. Vanished into the dark belly of their own father. It's such a visceral image of how a ruler's terror of losing power can literally make them devour their own future. But you just can't underestimate a mother's grief. When the sixth child, Zeus, was born, Rhea tricked Kronos. She handed him a stone wrapped in blankets to swallow instead. Zeus was spirited away, raised in secret in the mountains, just biding his time to make his grandfather's curse a reality.
Section 1. The Olympian Order, the Titanomachy, and the New Kings.
So when Zeus finally comes of age, he doesn't just challenge his dad, he unleashes absolute apocalypse. Through pure cunning, he forces Cronus to vomit up his swallowed siblings, and they emerge fully grown, furious, and totally ready for war. This kicks off the Titanomachy, 10 cataclysmic years of all-out war between the old Titans and this new generation of gods. The stalemate only breaks when Zeus frees his monstrous uncles, the Cyclopes, who forge him his ultimate weapon, the Thunderbolt. With that kind of firepower, the Olympians finally cast the Titans down into the blackest abyss. Now, with the old guard gone, the three victorious brothers have to divide up the universe. But they don't fight over it, they cast lots. Pure chance. To Zeus goes the sky, cementing him as the undisputed king. Poseidon gets the deep, restless sea, ruling it with his trident. And Hades, he draws the underworld, taking up his helm of darkness and accepting the shadowed realm of the dead with this quiet, eerie resolve. The earth itself was left as neutral ground, and they built their new, glittering court high up on Mount Olympus.
Let's actually pause right here for a second, because if we want to truly understand this universe, we need to talk about Moira, or fate. Despite all their thunderbolts and immortality, the gods were not the ultimate authority. Above every single one of them was fate. It was this inescapable, cosmic force, usually pictured as three sisters who spun, measured, and cut the thread of every single life. And this is absolutely crucial to take away. To the Greeks, no amount of power exempts you from your destiny. Even Zeus, sitting on his high throne, could not stop fate. If a thread was meant to be cut, the king of the gods was completely powerless to stop it. It's this underlying, terrifying truth that everyone, divine or mortal, is bound by a predetermined end that gives Greek myth its incredibly heavy, tragic weight.
Section 2. The Age of Heroes, when demigods walked the earth.
With the heavens finally ordered, the camera essentially pans down to Earth, and we enter this brief, incredibly brilliant window of time where the gods didn't just watch us from the clouds, they actually walked among us. They loved mortals, and they fathered children with them. To put these heroes in context, the poet Hesiod outlined 5 ages of man. We started in a peaceful golden age under Cronus, then slid into a foolish, arrogant silver age, followed by a brutal, incredibly violent bronze age. But right before the final collapse, there was this massive upward spike, the heroic age. This was the glorious era of the demigods. It burned so fiercely, but it was incredibly brief, eventually giving way to the Iron Age. And the Iron Age? Well, according to Hesiod, that's where we are right now, an era of endless toil, sorrow, fading justice, and completely silent gods. But before humanity was left to fend for itself in the Iron Age, we needed a fighting chance.
And we got that fighting chance from a titan named Prometheus. Look, when humans were first created, we were pathetic. We were weak, freezing, and totally defenseless in the dark. Prometheus looked at us and felt pity. Zeus specifically wanted mankind kept in the dark, subjugated and fearful. But Prometheus completely defied him. He stole fire straight from the divine forge and handed it to us. And this wasn't just physical warmth. This fire was the spark of civilization itself. It was metalwork, it was language, it was progress. But Zeus's vengeance was absolutely merciless. He had Prometheus chained to a desolate mountain peak where an eagle would rip out and eat his liver every single day, only for it to heal every night so the torture could start all over again. Prometheus took on an eternity of agony, the ultimate sacrifice, just so humanity could have a future.
Armed with the gift of fire and running on the blood of the gods, the Age of Heroes absolutely exploded. But being a hero in ancient Greece was a totally crushing burden. It really mirrors the impossible expectations we put on our own leaders today. You had Perseus hunting down the mortal Gorgon Medusa, constantly navigating this deadly web of divine favors. The mighty Heracles, who was literally driven insane by the goddess Hera and tricked into murdering his own family, enduring 12 impossible labors just to find an ounce of redemption. There's Theseus wandering into the pitch-black labyrinth to slaughter the Minotaur, eventually laying the political groundwork for Athens itself. Jason sailing across the edges of the known world to grab the Golden Fleece, only to end his life in bitter exile. And Oedipus. Man, Oedipus tried so desperately, so valiantly to outrun the prophecy that he'd kill his father and marry his mother, that he sprinted headlong right into it. These weren't just ancient action stars. They are enduring, deeply human symbols of wrestling with crushing guilt, impossible burdens, and the absolute cruelty of fate.
Section 3. The Tragedy of Troy. A war for beauty and pride.
But every glorious age has to end, and the heroic age, it didn't fade away quietly. It violently bled to death on the sands of Asia Minor. The Trojan War was the beginning of the end, a cataclysm that dragged in every great king, every single legendary warrior, and even the gods themselves, breaking the ancient world forever. And how does this absolute apocalypse kick off? Not with the massive invading army, but with a piece of fruit. At a divine wedding, Eris, the goddess of discord, was intentionally left off the guest list. Insulted, she tosses a golden apple right into the middle of the crowd. Engraved on it are just 3 words, "To the fairest." Immediately, Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite start fighting over it. To settle it, they drag in a mortal shepherd prince named Paris to be the judge. Aphrodite plays dirty and bribes him with the love of the most beautiful woman on earth, Helen of Sparta. Paris takes the deal. He sails to Sparta, runs off with Helen, who by the way is already married to King Menelaus, and inadvertently triggers a sacred, binding oath among every Greek king alive. A completely petty vanity contest over an apple ends up launching 1,000 ships and shattering empires.
The emotional and physical toll of this 10-year siege on Troy, or Ilium, was just staggering. It completely stripped away any remaining nobility from these heroes. You have King Agamemnon, who needs favorable winds for his war fleet. His solution? He commits the ultimate sin and sacrifices his own daughter, Iphigenia. Then you have the invincible Achilles, who gets his pride hurt by Agamemnon and simply withdraws his troops, sitting in his tent while his brothers in arms are brutally slaughtered. You've got noble Hector, the Trojan prince, fighting a war he didn't start, purely out of duty to his doomed city, only to be struck down and dragged mercilessly behind a chariot. And finally, the Trojan horse itself. This wasn't some glorious, honorable victory in open combat. It was a deceptive, cowardly midnight slaughter hidden inside a wooden idol that burned a magnificent city to ash.
And what was all that bloodshed actually for? There's this incredibly haunting moment in Homer's Odyssey where the clever Odysseus travels down into the underworld and finds the ghost of Achilles. Odysseus tries to cheer him up, praising his legendary immortal glory, but Achilles just looks at him and says, "Better to be a slave in life than a king among shades." It is a chilling, devastating reflection on the absolute hollowness of heroic glory. All that blinding pride, the endless rage, the oceans of blood. In the end, death takes every single one of them, leaving behind nothing but shadows and silence. The Trojan War was the explosive climax of the mythic age. The survivors who actually made it back returned to broken homes, cursed bloodlines, and a world that was already moving on without them.
Section 4. The gods fade away. Olympus eclipsed. With the great heroes buried and the mythic cities turned to smoldering ruins, we step into the twilight of the gods. The world was rapidly expanding, massive new empires were shifting the balance of power, and very slowly, the great altars of Olympus just started going cold. It wasn't some dramatic final battle that ended them. It was a quiet, creeping fading of belief. As Rome rose up, they absorbed the Greek pantheon, but they fundamentally ripped out its soul. Just look at the Greek Zeus versus the Roman Jupiter. Zeus was this wild, deeply flawed, hyper-passionate storm god who was constantly down on earth making a total mess of mortal lives. He was raw, unpredictable nature. But Jupiter, the Romans completely sanitized him. He became this distant, hyper-formal imperial lawgiver, meticulously shaped to reflect Roman statecraft and civic duty. The gods were no longer these chaotic, terrifying presences you might stumble across in the deep woods. They had been transformed into heavily politicized mascots for the empire.
The actual eclipsing of Olympus was a slow bleed from multiple different directions. First, you had these underground mystery cults like those following Dionysus or Demeter popping up. They promised actual personal salvation and a direct connection to the divine, something those cold, state-sponsored Roman rituals completely lacked. At the same time, philosophers were gaining traction, openly mocking the absurdity of worshipping these petty, incredibly human-like gods who constantly bickered and cheated on each other. And then, the final nail in the coffin, the rise of a new, monotheistic faith. Christianity offered strict moral unity, one unseen God, and a totally clear path to salvation. There was no epic mythological Ragnarok. By the time the Roman Emperor Theodosius I officially outlawed pagan sacrifices and locked the temple doors forever, the old gods had already faded away. Left alone, the great marble statues cracked, the paint peeled off, and the ancient sanctuaries just went totally silent.
Section 5. Myth's eternal echo, the rebirth of the gods.
But here is the really beautiful part, and it's exactly why we are still talking about this in this explainer today. The gods stopped being worshipped, yes, but they never actually died. They just went to sleep, patiently waiting for a world that would inevitably need them again. Centuries later, during the Renaissance, the pantheon was resurrected, not on blood-stained altars, but carved into marble, painted across sweeping canvases, and woven into brilliant literature. The greatest artists and thinkers looked back to antiquity because they realized these myths held the key to understanding the human condition. And later on, groundbreaking psychologists like Carl Jung took it a step further. He realized these gods weren't just primitive superstitions. They are the permanent, deeply ingrained archetypes of the human psyche. Aphrodite is our undeniable desire. Ares is our explosive rage. Athena is our calculating intellect. And Prometheus is our stubborn, beautiful defiance. The ancient Greeks didn't just invent a religion, they built a mirror. And humanity has literally never stopped looking into it.
Which leaves us with a genuinely profound question to sit with. If the grand temples are all in ruins, if the massive statues are locked away behind glass in museums, and if the altars have been stone cold for over 2,000 years, where do the gods live now? Well, the answer is everywhere. They are not dead, they have simply moved into our books, our songs, our dreams, and our memory. Every single time we share a story about a hero completely overwhelmed by their destiny, or about a love so fierce it tears a kingdom apart, or about a brilliant mind reaching just a little too close to the sun and falling, we are breathing life right back into Olympus. These ancient foundational myths aren't just history to be memorized, they are the enduring, immortal blueprint for how we understand our deepest fears, our worst flaws, and our absolute greatest potentials. Thank you for joining me for this explainer. I want you to keep an eye out for the myths playing out in your own life this week. Because if Eris is our rage and Aphrodite is our desire, Which ancient god is quietly driving your destiny today? Think about it. I'll see you in the next one.